Over the past several days, something like 75 drops have come from, posts have come from Q. Um, as many of you know, I have not been around for a while. I've been working busily on a couple other projects, including one huge one that I keep telling you is going to drop in a few days, and I think it's still going to drop in a few days. So it includes a website, it includes some video, it includes a petition, it includes a lot of things, and it is a big deal, or at least I see it as a big deal, and it is a game changer if it works. So I anxiously await seeing how everybody responds to it, and I'll get it out in a few days. In the meantime, what I've decided to do with the Q postings, because I can do what most people do and read them line by line and tell you what I think they mean. I can look at it in a broader perspective and go through it sequentially and take a look at each of the topics, which is what I've done in the past. Or I can do what I think is in the grand scheme of it, the red pilling of it is more important than the others. And so I have a couple themes I want to look at. And one of them today is, my first one is to look at what this whole thing of graft, corruption, bribery, etc. involves and how it fits into it, and to try to get some perspective about what really is going on and to see how big it is. Because Q keeps telling us these things are huge. I'm going to tell you they're bigger than huge. They are monumental. They are all-encompassing. Huge is not the right word. All-encompassing is barely a term that adequately encompasses it there. So, all right, so the common belief of most of us is that there's graft, corruption, bribery, etc., and that $5 or $10 million gets dumped off here. There's the typical kind of deal with some of these folks that are in Congress that end up with millions of dollars. And of course, Q has pointed out that there are a number of them, including Pelosi and others, that ended up being multimillionaires on a couple $100,000 salary where they're actually paying for multiple homes. How does that work? Well, the numbers don't work. They simply don't work. And that's the common thing. And you've got guys like the former House Speaker, Denny Hastert, and here's a proven deal that shows that he had a bunch of developers, investors that said, hey, look, we need to have a highway interchange here, so we're going to give you some of the property where the highway interchange should be, and then you just punch it through the legislature, through the Congress, stick it in there and flag it so that we get our interchange on the highway the way we need it, and that makes all the property worth a lot of money. So we're going to give this to you for a little bit of money now, and then we're going to all make money because you're going to get this highway interchange paid for. And that's exactly what they did. And of course, it dumped millions of dollars in Denny Hastert's pocket, and it looked transparent. It looked like there was no big deal going on, except that, of course, when you look at it, there was, in fact, stuff going on, and it's obvious. The second layer of this thing, has to do with the scams, the settlements, the government agencies, and the rest of that. You've got people like Elizabeth Warren and others who have set up sub-agencies that are supposedly giving grants to people for benefits out of settlements. And government goes in basically working like a class action outfit and gets huge settlements from big pharma, from the banks, from insurance, etc., and they dump millions and millions and perhaps even billions of dollars into these sub-agencies that are supposed to trade off the benefit against what the damage that these outfits did, and they seek grants, and interestingly enough, the grants all go to liberal agencies that are providing benefit for people like Elizabeth Warren and her constituency, and working out from there. And so you've got that layer. You also have, which is bigger than that, and is part of the big Clinton scheme, which looks like the top end of the pile, right? People typically and commonly on YouTube look at the Clinton payoffs, the Clinton trust the Clinton Foundation as the big end of it. Well, it's not even halfway up the scale. Yes, it's tens of billions of dollars, and yes, Hillary did the unthinkable for anybody that's a true a human, that's a citizen. Yes, they did pay for play. You know, they did hundreds of millions of dollars of pay for play, and they did it saying, hey, look, if you do this, if you do this, then we'll give you a grant through the Secretary of State's office. And one of the obvious ones is what I think it's Laureate University, where Bill was an honorary trustee, and so the Secretary of State's office gave $50-odd million to the university, and Bill got 17 as an honorarium. Well, so he got a third of the money. And you see this in Russia and the rest of that. And of course, it's bad enough that it's graft built. That is, that kind of thing, where the Clintons simply pocketed 15 or 20 million dollars. I think it was 17. It's vastly worse when it includes trading it for secrets, for patents, for copyrights, for trade secrets, or even worse yet, for governmental insider benefits that Clintons and Obama and Bushes all did, which is they gave secrets to China and North Korea and perhaps Pakistan and elsewhere in exchange for private money to be benefited. Huge, huge problem, and billions of dollars involved. But there are layers above that. One of the layers that's above that has to do with the whole trade-off of the federal agencies and trafficking, and this is a big thing that's covered by Q in this series of drops, which has to do with guns and drugs and nukes and body parts and slaves and children, and of course the whole pedophilic thing. And it's the question that Q gives is how does this work? Where does this come from? Well, it runs all the way from Planned Parenthood, which looks innocuous enough, and it involves body parts of fetal tissue and the rest of that. But if you see that there are edges of that going on in this country, then what you have to say is, what does it look like elsewhere? And one of the things that's pointed out by it is by several places on the internet, and some of them that I've looked at, is that wherever there's turmoil, wherever there's migration, wherever there are wars, wherever there are terrible human suffering, whether you've got the tsunami, you've got earthquakes, you've got hurricanes, you have cyclones, you have disruptions with wars or interfighting, then you have displaced people, and you have and injured people. You have displaced children that can be snatched up, and nobody even knows whether they're missing or buried under rubble, or they've been taken, or they've been militarized, so that all of those things can happen, and nothing gets evidenced because the chaos that's there doesn't account for the people that are missing. And what's more than so, some of them can be dragged off to be militarized, some of them can be dragged off to be slaves, to be sex slaves, to be trafficked, and as has been pointed out in recent postings, there is the potential for there to be injured people that are dragged into so-called health clinics to have their broken legs fixed, or the abrasions, or the turmoil that they've had. They get anesthetized, and then their body parted out. And apparently there are as many as 18,000 Syrians that came into Turkey that have been basically body parted out. So there is this trafficking of these essential body parts, and of course, because we're doing heart, lung, and other transplants, these body parts are worth a lot more for the person that's doing the cutting up than that Syrian is fixed up and alive. And I mean, I know that sounds absolutely abhorrent and horrible, but that's actually what's happening. And so we see little pieces of it, but of course nobody's reporting it, and the mainstream media is not reporting it except in minor occasions, because if they report it too much, then it exposes everything else, right? So we have the 33 children that are dragged out of Haiti, and it looks simple enough, and the only reason it looks simple enough and innocent enough, or at least has that potential, is that they were captured on the border coming out of Haiti as opposed to as part of the distribution pool, which would have occurred over the next few weeks or months thereafter of those same children. So that's a huge, huge project. But look, but wait, there's more. That's only the third level as I have described it. There are federal agencies above this that are sucking money out by the billions and billions of dollars, and it's going unaccounted. How can that possibly be? We have budgets, right? We just passed this budgetary matter to get us through another year. We've got $1 trillion plus, blah, blah, blah. And so everybody knows that that's how much money we're going to spend. Well, that's a total lie. It is a total falsehood. That it absolutely has no bearing, in fact, at all. And why is that? Well, because you see, here's what they do. They can take the checkbook, right? And they can write checks. And if it were you or me, let's say I had $10,000 in the bank to make it several months, I could write $10,000 worth of checks, and then my bank is going to say, you're broke. We will not cash any more of your checks. Well, in the case of the federal agencies, what you have instead is they write checks and the checks get paid. And the checks get paid to the tunes because there's no accounting, there's no audit, there's no follow through, there's no budgetary management of any of this, but also because these checks get cashed. It has nothing to do with the balance sheet. So what I do at the end of the year is I take my checkbook and say, well, I overspent by X $100,000. I'll zero the account out and start over again. So here's what has been going on, and here's how long this has worked. If you take a look, and most of you have heard this, seen this in some fashion, the day before 9/11 in 2001, Donald Rumsfeld steps up to the microphone and says, we have upwards of $2.6 trillion missing from the Pentagon, and we're investigating it. Well, oddly enough, the next morning when the missile slash jet slash hijacked Cessna pilot box cutter Iraqi slash Saudi guys crashed into the Pentagon, which of course is absolutely impossible. Interestingly enough, 30 of the 31, I think the numbers are correct, or 31 of the 32 people that were working in the wing of the Pentagon that had been newly remodeled for their benefit were all, interestingly enough, killed. And all of the $2.6 trillion investigation that was ongoing just simply disappeared, as it did with building number 7 that wasn't even hit, that crashed and apparently had the backup copy of those $2.6 trillion that were missing. How can you miss $2.6 trillion? If you look at it, the budget at the time was $500 billion, $600 billion a year for the entire Pentagon, and those numbers may be off by $100 billion or so. Who cares? The point of the matter is that they were spending, if this 2.6 trillion was taken from 10 years previously, they were spending half again more money than they were budgeted. And that had been ongoing for years and years. That was 2001. Since that time, there's been an audit, and the audit shows that there is upwards of $20 trillion. And people at AIM and other folks will say, well, gee, that's $20 trillion. That's all the SES stuff. Well, no, it's not. It is $20 trillion in one agency in the Pentagon, in the military budget. That's one budget. And so what has happened is effectively we have created $20 trillion out of nothing. Pay attention. $20 trillion out of nothing. That money got paid to somebody, somewhere, whether it got paid in the country or whatever else. So if Boeing has an overrun on their military stuff, and we pay an extra $10 billion out, I'm not picking on Boeing, I'm just using it as an example. We pay $10 billion out extra. Boeing spends that $10 billion, and that adds to the total supply of money in the market system, and it effectively inflates and decreases the value of all the money. So in effect, these agencies are working like their own bankers. You got this? They're working like their own bankers. They're creating money and then spending it, and it's going into the market, and nobody is accounting for it. So Catherine Austin Fitts checks on HUD, which is where she used to work, and there, guess what? There's another $20 trillion missing out of there. So those are two agencies. What are the rest of them doing? Well, it goes on and on and on out from there. If there are 15 agencies that are doing this, we have no idea how much money is filtering out through it. So this is a sieve, right? And what you have to see is you put money in here or you put nothing in here, and it comes out through all the screens. And it comes out and out and out, and every bit of it that exceeds the tax amount that we have depreciates the value of your money. So part of the reason that your money's only worth 4 cents of what it was when the Fed Reserve took over, a dollar now is worth 4 cents. Part of that is that every time this money gets multiply spent through the screen and everybody's playing with it, every time that I create money out of nothing, I devalue all the money that's out there. And you and I are losing money on a regular basis because the federal government is overspending. So that's a huge deal. And that is noted as noted by Q. But wait, there's more, and it's worse than that. There is one level that's clear above, even those federal agencies, even above the trillions of dollars that are being spent by the Pentagon and the rest of it, money that they don't have. And that is that we have the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve is supposedly our central banker, right? It's the place that goodness occurs. It's a place where these responsible bankers are managing our money for us and saving us. And by the way, for anybody that's watching, it's critical to know this. The Federal Reserve is not federal, okay? There is not 1% of it that's owned by the government. Nobody in the government has any control over it. And most of the ownership of the Fed Reserve is private banks owned by private individuals, most of that, much of it European, and a few wealthy folks in the United States. So it is wealthy banker-oriented cabals that are playing with our money in the Federal Reserve. Secondly, that you need to know is that there is no reserve. Even these trillionaire bankers are not putting a dime of their own money at risk. And let me note for you 2008. So when they screwed up the entire banking system, when the trade-offs and the packaged mortgage systems that were put together failed, allegedly, even though it was a false flag created event, but they supposedly failed. Who was it that bailed them out? They didn't bail each other out. They didn't bail it out with their own money. They didn't even bail it out with the money they had stolen from us, okay? They bailed it out with your and my tax money, and even worse yet, debt that is applied and added to your and my obligations as United States citizens and taxpayers. So we both deflated the value of the currency, we expanded the money supply, and we added extra debt, a huge amount of extra debt. So how much was that? Well, according to the levy agency and others, and according to some audits, when we said to Hank Paulson, yeah, all right, idiot Georgie Bush authorized this $700 billion bailout that was supposed to restabilize the entire economy and balance out the losses and the rest of that, everybody suffered. All the little people suffered. Everybody that had mortgages, that had most of your money invested in homes and the rest of that all went down by a third, and we took the middle class and erased 40% of their total value. We closed pension funds, we closed private savings, the IRAs and the rest of that, anything that was tied to the stock market. plummeted, and for people who were retired, they lost huge sums of money, and it was all part of the deflation of the value of capital. And the people that did it, the bankers that did it, gave themselves $700 billion or so, we said. Well, that's not even a part of the truth. The truth of the matter is that they wrote themselves a check, okay? They wrote checks out to the 5 or 6 or 8 major national banks and a half dozen international banks that are not even American banks that we were worried about, somebody was worried about balancing, and loaned, gave, or endowed those banks with $29 trillion. Now, let me put this in perspective for you. The entire stock market, Wall Street, at some point has been worth anywhere from 18 to $30 trillion. What they did is they wrote checks and gave access to money to these major banks equivalent to the entire stock market, okay? And they let them do whatever they want. It wasn't audited. It wasn't agreed to. The Congress had no oversight of it. There was no responsibility for it. There was no proof that that stuff was even paid back. So what we have then are these major banks that got upwards of $3.25 trillion apiece, all down the line down to several hundred billion, 500 billion for the smaller banks. And that was all added to this money supply. It added out of nothing from the money supply. It is me taking my checkbook and multiplying it by a factor of 20 or 30 or 50. I've got $10,000 here. Well, let's make it 5 million, and I'll go ahead and spend it. And so I made the money, they made the money out of nothing, and then dumped it into the money supply and let people play with it. And they did that at the same time that the fractional banking and all the rest of that, their lending requirements were tightened up for us little people that had more trouble getting homes, had more trouble getting businesses, could not get lines of credit and the rest of that. So they shut us all down while they multiplied the outside of this up. So we've got graft and fraud and payoffs and bribery, and those are the little pieces. And then we've got pay for play, and those are the middle-sized pieces. And then we've got agencies that are spending trillions of dollars of money that's unaudited and that they don't have, and those are big pieces. And then we've got the federal bankers who are not accountable to us or not responsible to us, who are playing with, literally playing with trillions of dollars that impinge our money system, that circulate our money system, that devalue our money system, and we have no accountability for it, whatever. So when you get back to the Q deal and Q says, hey, look, this is bigger than you know, it's bigger, 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 bigger than you have any idea. And we're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars. And they're playing with this like it's a giant monopoly game, and they're running it off and running the money off. And what we tend to think of is that we've got $100 bills and they're being produced $100 bills. Well, it's much, much easier than that. All of you are on the internet. And all I have to do to make trillions of dollars is put zeros after a one and enter it. That's how we manipulate money that we don't have and that we newly create. So it's vastly more complicated than that. It is vastly more nefarious than that. And it is bigger than you know. So there's a little piece of it. I'm going to do another piece on this whole trading business, which has to do with the Red Cross, I am sorry to say, and others like it. I'll probably do that out today. And yes, this week I promise, or mostly promise, that I'll have this big announcement out. And I'm hoping that we just jump on this stuff because it's time. And it goes directly to the issues that I've talked about today. Thanks so much for watching, and give a thumbs up if you will. Subscribe if you will. And I really appreciate many of you have left comments and said, "Are you okay? Have you survived this?" Well, some people say I haven't survived. There's only part of me left, but this is all you get, right? So thanks so much.